Hey gang, welcome back for another episode of 0 to 40k. This one for me is really exciting. I've finally cracked into my Plague Marines. I was out last week on a business trip. I spent a lot of time actually reading on the plane, several good books, one of which entirely about and from the perspective of the Death Guard. So a little bit of lore might slip in as I ramble on aimlessly talking about painting models. I think I might actually do a whole episode just talking about lore at some point. But anyhow, yes, we've gotten to these Plague Marines, and this one's fun. I'm going to walk you through paint selection, some technique stuff, as I did the first one, and then I've got another couple that I finished up right after. So let's get underway. This is 0 to 40k. So before getting started, I took a bunch of what I have learned from previous little projects here, and a few little tests that I did off to the side with some new products that I hadn't used before. I primed up just some pieces of plastic and just sort of painted away a few times. And here's what I came to for a starting plan. And keep in mind, plans like this, once gunfire starts, they get thrown out the window. But a lot of it I did stick to. So they got a primer coat of Chaos Black, with some Death Guard green from above. This is called the Zenithal method, I guess. I didn't go crazy with matte black into matte white, but I did want some amount of variance. I'm not sure it actually mattered based on how I did it, but it felt good doing it, so I gave it a shot. The armor is a mix of two colors. I wanted to sort of harken back to the good old, I keep saying good old days, the old days of the Death Guard. So some of the armor is actually light colored, and I just got Wraithbone and then Seraphim Sepia. And then to mix it up, like knees, shoulders, helm, some bits of backpacks, got a more traditional grimy green treatment. That was Plague Bear Flesh, and then this other new stuff called AK Slimy Dark Grime, which I gotta tell you is a great name. Has a very interesting texture. I'm not sure it's supposed to be used like this, but I love it now. I wanted highlights on there. I wanted a little bit of shininess, so I went with Warplock Bronze for the trim around shoulder pads. This guy's got some crazy spikes coming out the side, and there's a lot of machinery in the backpack kit. I will dumb this down as I do all shiny things a little bit here and there, but because it's so dark, it's not cloyingly shiny, and it kind of gives a neat effect, to the overall suit of armor. Like there's a little bit of rich, dark shine. Then for blades, I did Runefang Steel. It's a very good standard weapon color. And then I got some other new stuff. Vallejo 302 and 301 are just the numbers of it. They're both different colors of rust. It came in this neat tank kit. They were both great. Loved them. I was going to say finally, but there's still more. What a list. Some of these guys have weird teeth coming out of guts like this guy does. Some of them have horns sticking out. For all these, I just hit them with Wraithbone, then Skeleton Horde, a little bit darker on the bottom, and then some Berserker Bloodshade in some spots to make it look like the teeth were a little bit stained with blood. And then this model didn't have any cloth on them, but when I got to the second and third, there's some like loinclothy stuff going on. So I went with, was it Blood for the Blood God, which is another dip into using technical paints, probably not the way I'm supposed to. I think you're just supposed to use it on blades because it's very shiny, but it worked out. And I shaded a bit more with Karoberg Crimson. So this is most of the plan. I end up going back in several spots and needing to grime things up. So there will be a couple little moments where I just dab in some, what is it, Agrax Earthshade? Maybe that's it. There's a few other things that I do, but I'll sort of cover those as I get to them. But this, for the most part, is what I stuck with for all three models. All right, so here you can see the primer coats, I hit the whole thing with Chaos Black, and then from top angles, I hit it with Death Guard Green. So what you're still going to get is a bunch of black in the real deep recesses, especially from the bottom. And then on top, you can see that it's, especially all the faces like that blade that are angled up, it's going to be a bit more green. So right here, I think I'm using Wraithbone. A couple spots I may end up using Plaguebearer Flesh. What I'm trying to do is super duper lighten up a bunch of spots that are going to get either color or just a wash later. I'm not being terribly careful here because there's going to be a ton of cleanup that happens later no matter what, and all of these faces have different, edging that's going to get metallics and stuff. The main thing I'm trying to do is avoid just like flat out hitting a section that's supposed to be all brass or steel or anything like that. Basically, I'm just going to hit all the armor with this same coat. At this point, you may be asking yourself, why did you go through all the trouble of priming this thing in essentially dark colors just to go over it? What is essentially off-white? The point here is that on the very broad faces of things, like you can see on that like shoulder pauldron-y thing, yeah, that thing is coated. But regardless, everywhere around that is a recessed spot, it's darkened, and it'll naturally give shadow. It'll naturally help you with spots like behind the neck, around the gorget, that it's really hard to get into with a brush. At least it'll be shaded in. The second part of this is that even though I've painted over in white, the undercoat of primer still shows through in a way. If this thing was primed in white, this would be much, much brighter. So I'm basically coming at this white angle from a darker color space, and it does make a difference. So we're getting into the spot that I was talking about during the plan, where I'm using Warplock Bronze on a bunch of metallic 2D things on here. There's a bunch of hardware, and it's really, really cool. You can see that it's very dark, but it is still metallic, and I think it adds a really interesting sort of layer. I don't end up rusting the daylights out of this like I will with the blades, but it's a really interesting sort of color contrast. The bronziness of it is like deep and rich and almost has a reddishness to it depending on the light that hits it. So this step's awesome. I'm having a lot of fun here. Right here, we're hitting up all the spots that should be more steel-like than bronze-like with Runefang steel. It's just a lot of little fiddly bits. The blade, some other bits of hardware like hoses I hit with this instead of the bronze. So yeah, definitely fun. Looking forward to grinding it up later. At this moment, and it's pretty rare, I'm somewhat convinced that I've legitimately screwed this thing up. This green looks nothing like what I expected it to. It doesn't look anything like when I tested. I genuinely think I might have screwed this one up. Yeah, especially when you see it on this helmet, it's like a weird margarita color. But we're just gonna power through it. Maybe it just needs a few more coats. Spoiler: it really just needed a few more coats. Here's where things legitimately turn a corner. All of my faith in this process starts to become restored. It looks like a pretty junky paint job right now, but at this step I'm starting to add the Seraphim Sepia to all of the lighter colored armor bits, and you're just going to watch as it goes. It starts coming together. I thinned it out quite a bit just to be careful, but now we're starting to get this like interesting like dark cream light latte color coming through, and the model, obviously we still got to take care of the green, but it starts looking like it might actually come out pretty cool. So I went back to my notes, and I noticed, you'll see this if you go back and check the picture, under the armor highlights part, that first pass was Militarum green, and I scratched it out while I was working, and replaced it with the AK Slimy Dark Grime. So that first like neon limey thing was a bad color choice. Now as I'm going back over it, the Slimy Dark Grime color, it's starting to come together. It's starting to look Death Guard. It's starting to look really cool. We're starting to turn the corner on tiny details. Right now, the chest teeth stuff, I want to make sure like it looks like they've fed recently, so I'm just shading a little bit with Berserker blood shade here on the end of the teeth. It just makes them look a little bit cooler. Just being very patient. It's pretty watered down. They'll eventually get a coat or two of this stuff. Now that we've gotten some of the heavier, sloppier parts out of the way, I'm grabbing a, for me at least, super tiny brush and re-elevating some of the tiny little detail bits here so they're no longer lost. I'm just being very ginger about it, using a very light hand, picking out some of the embossed stuff on the shoulder pads, eventually some highlights on the top side of angular things like armor plates and stuff like that. It's Wraithbone, so I'm going back to the original coat on top, but I'm being patient enough to realize that like you're going to do one part of the process, then come back later and add some highlights to it, then come back later, then clean something up, then darken something. And I'm starting to just get comfortable with that workflow. At this point, I'm just taking my time, looking for little places that I can add some detail, and having as much fun as I can with it. If you know me at this point, I think you probably understand that one of my favorite parts is taking things that are super shiny and rusting the living daylights out of them. It's so much fun. This time around, I used some new paints. It's Vallejo 302 and 301, dark rust and light rust, respectably. I don't know. They're awesome. So I'm just going around and hitting anything that's super shiny with a little bit of this rust. I think first the darker stuff and then eventually a coat of the lighter stuff in certain spots. I'll eventually use a toothpick to scrape some of the rust off. But at this point, we're pretty close to done and it's coming together. There you have it, gang. Three, not just one, three Plague Marines done and done. So there was, I don't want to call them steps, but I did preen these guys a little bit longer, little spots here and there with some washes or to clean up some edges. Probably could stand to clean up a few more edges, but they're looking great. As you can see on the second and third model, there's some red spots that got, with cloth and some tongue stuff, that got blood for the Blood God and Carroburg Crimson. But that's a happy trio of Plague Marines. Now, we're certainly not done with Plague Marines. I think I've got 11 more? That sounds about right. And we'll get to those eventually. But this is a darn good start, and it's hard to quantify in my head that just a month and a half ago I had never painted a model, and now I've got this nice shelf that is starting to fill itself out pretty nicely now. in terms of what's next, I've got some options. I got one of these, I got one of these, I got one of these guys, and then I got one of these guys that was actually free-ish. I mean, I signed up for Warhammer Plus, but I guess every once in a while you get a free model. So let me know in the comments what you think would be fun next. Who knows? Plenty of options there. And if you're having fun, watching me go through this little journey, hit the like button, subscribe, tell a friend, all that stuff. And thanks a bunch for coming and hanging out with me again, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.